Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Looking Back, Looking Forward, a Black General Counsel perspective on equity, diversity, and inclusion in Canada. My name is Andrew Nunes, and I'm a partner in the Toronto office and a vice chair of the Business Law Department for the Ontario region. Just before we begin, I'm pleased to inform you that this event is being offered with live French translation. To switch over, please click the French button underneath the video window. Now, today we are pleased to host what I am sure will be a very informative and enlightening panel discussion as part of our firm's Black History Month celebrations. While we seek to be mindful of and to address issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion on a continuous basis, Black History Month provides an opportunity for particular focus on anti-Black racism and racial injustice, not just in society more broadly, but also specifically in the legal profession. This starts with education and understanding, but ultimately must lead to action. To help with this, today we will hear from three amazing individuals who hold the top legal position in their respective organizations, despite the barriers that are faced by Black lawyers due to systemic racism and the extra burdens that are often carried by Black lawyers as a result. When I started at Fasken as a summer student many years ago, to my knowledge, there was only one Black lawyer and one Black articling student at the firm. Today, we have many more. But while progress has been made in the profession, there is still work to be done, noting, of course, that it is not only about quantity, but also about quality, about equity and true inclusion. I'm proud to be at a law firm that is working to move the needle, with this event being just one of many examples. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to our firm managing partner, Peter Feldberg, to provide opening remarks and to share with you some of the things Fasken is doing to address issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, specifically as it relates to the Black community. Peter?
Thanks, Andrew. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's discussion. I'm pleased that we're hosting this session to honor Black History Month. As Andrew said, Fasken's committed to a diverse, inclusive, and equitable work environment. EDI is a core value for us, and it's essential to the achievement of our firm vision. As individuals and as an influential law firm, we have a responsibility to contribute and make a difference in the EDI space, not just for our firm members, but for our clients and for our communities. We have a terrific panel today, and I'm looking forward, as I'm sure that all of you are, to hearing about their experiences, listening to their advice, and learning something. And I'd like to thank all of our guest panelists for joining us today. I'd like to remind the Fasken people that we have some current initiatives to try to address barriers to inclusion for Black lawyers within the firm and the legal world generally. These include committing to the goals and targets within the Black North Initiative Law Firm Pledge, building a pipeline of Black lawyers through our 10-year partnership with the Black Future Lawyers Program, which supports and creates engagement and mentoring opportunities for Black undergraduate students who aspire to become lawyers, providing scholarships and mentorship to Black law students through our partnership with Icon Talent Partners, and supporting early career development and advancement for Black lawyers in their first to third years through the Early Career Program in partnership with the Canadian Association of Black Lawyers. I'd now like to hand the floor to my partner, Andrew Alleyne, who will be the moderator of today's discussion. Andrew is a partner in the firm's corporate technology group with a practice focused on corporate and commercial transactions. Outside of his practice, Andrew is an active member of the community. For over a decade, he was the director of the Canadian Association of Black Lawyers and is also a past president of CABLE. Some of his current roles include vice president and director of the Canadian Technology Law Association and member of the advisory board of the Black Professionals in Technology Network. Andrew?
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Andrew, as well. Now, I'm very excited to have the opportunity to start a conversation with three friends, clients, and moreover, phenomenal Black female Canadian general counsels. Ordinarily, I emphasize the role, not the physical characteristics of being a Black woman in regard to being a general counsel, but in this setting, I want to emphasize all these factors. Being three of the handful of Black GCs in Canada is both a testament to their respective accomplishments to date and a commentary on how far we still need to travel towards achieving our goals of equity, diversity, and inclusion in our profession. So now to introduce three women who many of you will already know from their active role in the Black legal community. Terrie-Lynne Devonish. Terrie-Lynne has held successfully senior legal and compliance roles at global organizations. She has over 20 years of experience leading legal and compliance functions, and she's currently the Chief Legal Officer and Corporate Secretary with Altus Group Limited. She's responsible for global legal function at that organization, and prior to this role, Terrie-Lynne served in several senior roles at Aon plc, including as Chief Counsel for Canada, Chief Operating Officer Canada, and North American Chief Compliance Officer. Terrie-Lynne is called in Ontario and Illinois, which may become relevant in our discussion today, and she holds a number of charitable and community directorships and is active in a number of bar associations, including Cable. Terrie-Lynne was one of the recipients of the Canada Law Awards Female Trailblazer Excellence Award in 2021 and was chosen as one of Canada's top 40 under 40 previously. Sue-Lynn Noel. Sue-Lynn is Vice President, General Counsel, and Corporate Secretary of Purolator Inc., as well as co-chair of its Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Leadership Council. Previously, she was a partner in private practice and held senior in-house counsel roles in the customs brokerage, transportation, logistics, and waste management industries, where her focus was on M&A activity. She graduated from Osgoode Hall and was called to the bar in 2002, and she is a past president of the Canadian Association of Black Lawyers and served as vice chair of the Women's Equality Advisory Group for the Law Society of Ontario. She actively speaks at seminars and conferences on corporate legal issues, as well as legal services innovation and the business case for diversity. She also regularly speaks to middle school and high school students about careers in business law and mentors many lawyers at all stages of their career. In 2020, Sue-Lynn was named one of Canada's top 25 most influential lawyers by Canadian Lawyer Magazine in the business category. And Patrice Rouse. Patrice is Farm Mutual Re's General Counsel and Corporate Secretary, and she oversees the company's legal, corporate secretarial, compliance, and privacy functions. Patrice is originally a U.S.-trained lawyer as a graduate cum laude from Howard University School of Law, and she began her career at Sullivan Cromwell in New York. She has over 15 years of progressive leadership experience with legal expertise as a regulatory, governance, litigation, and transactional attorney in the insurance, banking, securities, and capital markets industries in Canada, the U.S., and the Caribbean. Patrice is a strong advocate for inclusion and has always been committed to community service, and throughout her professional career has devoted her time to pro bono practice and volunteer work reflecting these values. So, welcome Terrie-Lynne, Sue-Lynn, and Patrice. I'm going to get started now on the questions. So, I'm going to ask each of you, kind of in turn, to tell us a little bit about your path to your current GC roles. I'm also going to ask you to share a little bit about the barriers that you've had to overcome to do so. And let us know if any of those barriers are ones that you see as barriers for others in their careers as well. I'm going to start with Terrie-Lynne on this question. Tell us a little bit about your path.
Thank you, Andrew. And just a note that it's just great to be here. Thank you to Fasken's for sponsoring this event. And it's great to see my friends and colleagues, Patrice and Sue-Lynn. So it was a kind of windy path. And I will say the obstacles, the key ones I would focus on are assumptions about ability. And, these things are sometimes not overt, but you could see if, when I was a student, you'd write a memo or you do something. There were often times when there was an assumption that because of the color of my skin, because of my background, I just simply wasn't capable, which means you've got to work twice or three times as hard, or there are opportunities that start provided to you. I mean, it was very clear to me I wasn't getting in front of clients as my white counterparts. So that's definitely one of them. The other one I would say is the notion, I know firms don't use this notion anymore, but the notion of fit. So this notion that you had to have a certain fit to get into a firm, and what that meant, I think we all know was code for you had to look and sound and come from the same background as the partners and the senior lawyers at the time, which certainly didn't look like me and didn't grow up where I grew up. And as I say, those two were definitely barriers, I think, to a lot of lawyers of color, a lot of Black lawyers, to getting ahead at law firms, getting ahead as in-house counsel. And there's still challenges to this day.
Thank you. And we'll kind of dive into that a little bit more, but I'd like to also ask Sue-Lynn if you can tell us a little bit about your path.
Sure, Andrew. And thank you, Fasken, for inviting me today. It's great to be able to talk about some of the barriers that I face, but I recognize my privilege in the color of my skin, that I may not have experienced the same kind of barriers that some of my darker skinned brothers and sisters face on a daily basis, trying to disprove stereotypes. I think that I benefit from being a little racially ambiguous, maybe when you first look at me. And that's actually been a benefit, but I don't hide that I self-identify as a Black woman. And I think if you spend 5 minutes talking to me, you know exactly who I am and what I'm about. And I think that I've always been very direct and authentic throughout my career. But I started out as a legal secretary. And I think being hindered by being seen as a legal secretary, because outwardly maybe I look like a legal secretary. I think that's been probably one of the larger barriers for me. I found it more difficult to make it as a woman in business than by virtue of the color of my skin. And I think that probably a lot of people on this call might share some of that. But I will say that I consider barriers those things that prevent you from going to your next stage. And so I don't think I would call them barriers per se, maybe challenges, because I wasn't sure that I would ever be a GC. In fact, I never aspired to be a GC. I liked very much being an M&A specialist, enjoyed it. And it was really only kind of after some time a way to reflect on what really is my purpose in life. I really knew that this was kind of the next step in terms of leaning into leadership and developing others and kind of moving from that success to significance aspect of my career. So now I am completely invested in like just developing other people. And I've got 20 people on the team at Purolator, and just spreading it outwardly. And I get that because one of the barriers I didn't face at Purolator is I'm actually the second Black GC. Before me, Marsha Lindsay was the GC at Purolator. And so that really relieved a ton of pressure. I didn't have to go through some of the usual things you have to do where you have to prove yourself and make people hear you and take your advice. She's already kind of broken through that barrier for me. She's been sitting around the executive table. She advised the board before. So with me coming in, I could really just focus on leveling up. How can I, now leapfrog and really lean into my ability and my capabilities without having that baggage? So I recognize the privilege of having someone walk before me, and now I get to help others come behind me.
Thanks, Sue-Lynn. Patrice, tell us about your path.
Thanks, Andrew, and thanks, Fasken, for having us on this panel and celebrating Black History Month with us. So my path, like Terry's, was a bit windy. It wasn't deliberate and intentional. I think I started thinking about it that way 6 years ago. If I'm being honest, Andrew, when I was younger, I wanted to be a detective. So naturally, a career in corporate law is the logical stepping stone, right? But when I graduated law school, I wanted a good job that was going to build my resume. And so, and I went to a historically Black law school. So the casual racism that I would experience throughout my career, I was warned, right? And I'm grateful for being warned. So, the discrediting of your work or the assumptions about your ability, like Terrie-Lynne, I've experienced that. The mistaking you for a non-lawyer in court and depositions, Sue-Lynn, same. And just, not having the freedom to make mistakes, even irrelevant ones, that's not having the freedom to learn like your colleagues would by making mistakes. You don't have that freedom. So it's, put your head down, work twice as hard because, everyone's looking at you and you are being judged because of the color of your skin. And I started out in the US and they let you know that expressly at times that you're being treated a certain way because of how you look. But so when I started thinking about what I wanted to do with my career, it was kind of, where am I going to have impact? And I was just, like I said, wanted a good job. And whenever I felt like I didn't belong, that's when I left any organization, right? We get stuck because we're afraid to leave, but I'm comfortable with it now. And so if I don't feel like I belong to a certain organization, I'm going to leave and look for where I belong. And it was in my last role as DGC that I realized I could have a significant impact. So I started being deliberate about looking for a GC role where, I can see that to fruition. And I'm happy to say I'm the first GC for this organization, the first Black executive, and already I think I'm having an impact. So, we'll see what's left to come.
That's awesome. I do find it also interesting that your thoughts on this, given that you went to an HBU, which, my sister also went to Howard, as you know, of course, know. And I always found, I contrasted her experience with my experience at U of T, where, I was one of 4 in my year, and, she was one of many more Black lawyers. And you think that it might be a better grounding because you feel that there are more of you. You've got that kind of groundswell of support. But, I think the EDI experience and the need for it is the same regardless of where you go and where you're coming from. So Keith, can someone tell me a little bit about how you've noticed, if you have noticed, the profession change when it comes to EDI over the course of your careers? So Patrice or...
Sure. And Terrie and Sue-Lynn can chime in. I think now there's dedicated staff for EDI in firms where there wasn't before, right? And there are definitely more Black lawyers. I see more Black lawyers in the profession today than when I first started. I see more of them in the corporate space today than when I first started. But, the U.S. has way more lawyers because there are way more Black lawyers in the corporate space than Canada does because they have more people as a general matter. But those are some of the changes I've seen.
Terrie or Sue-Lynn, you can also tell me about things where it hasn't changed either.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I agree with Patrice. There's definitely more conversation, more discussion, but where it has not changed at all is while there's a lot of conversation, or as my mother would say, chat, there's a lot of chat, but there's not nearly enough action. And I think somebody referenced the Black North Initiative, and there was a Globe and Mail study. I believe it was on that initiative that more than half of the organizations that had signed up had not done one thing or had not done the things they had promised. So there's a lot of talk, but there seems to be an inability, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more, but there seems to be an inability to put your money where your mouth is, which always astounds me. I mean, one thing you can do is just hire more Black lawyers. That's a start. So that's where it really hasn't changed, and where I frankly find it frustrating, and I'm puzzled by it.
Yeah, I think it's easy to make promises, and at least that's something. But I really find that a lot of organizations just don't know where to start, don't know what to do. They're afraid of missteps because we've all seen there's been a lot of missteps. Do you get behind this statement? Do you get behind that statement? And helping my own organization navigate a lot of those things, I think it takes a lot of courage, and it takes a lot of listening. And I think that's probably where I think I've really felt the most difference in the last few years is I actually really do feel like there's a lot more listening going on in the profession. Not necessarily all good stuff, but I do feel like I'm being asked, what I think, what can be done. And I don't know that I've been asked sincerely in the past. So I think that part is refreshing. But again, it's not about the numbers for me. Diversity is great, but unless those people are contributing and they're engaged and they're included, it doesn't unlock the power of diversity. So I've never really cared very much about a vast number of associates in a law firm. If they're not on my files, if they're not client relationship managers, if they're not, giving me that great advice, then it doesn't really help me. I'm looking for innovation and critical thinking and different perspectives. And if everyone sits around the table and they all look the same, I'm not going to get that.
It's interesting because there's a kind of a theme through some of these discussions, and just wanted to comment on, particularly on the Black North Initiative. Our experience, we took it seriously as a firm. We interrogated the pledge. We tried to refine the pledge, the things that were measurable, and work through it. And then one of the interesting phenomenon that we've noticed over the past year or so is that we're getting black lawyers and black staff and black people who are not volunteering the fact that they're black, right? And so, for many years we had the long time kind of sometimes excuse for some, sometimes frustration for others, that we couldn't give numbers in terms of the improvement of in terms of equity because people weren't self-identifying, and we're still seeing that. And that's it's really kind of frustrating when you actually are trying to do something to improve the situation. Like what do we think might be the cause for that in terms of in 2022 not wanting to self-identify? I understand in organizations where you feel let's say oppressed, but in other organizations where it's just it's neutral, or maybe it's a positive experience, why are people not volunteering their status?
I think people are afraid of tokenism. People are afraid that it could backfire on them, that assumptions will be made about them. Are they radical? Are they looking for special treatment? And that's unfortunate. And what it says to me is that we still haven't created safe spaces in our organization and organizations and in our profession. The other thing, the advice I would give to anyone that's a junior associate or that's afraid, don't be afraid. I think people know anyway. And, and I remember talking to someone recently who got promoted and said, I think they're just promoting me because I'm black. And I said, first of all, that would be very rare. And second of all, so what? Let's say they've just promoted you so they can check a box, but you've got the promotion, and now you can do your best work, and now you can make a difference. So take the promotion. There are lots of people that were promoted because they looked a certain color, or, their parents knew someone. I mean, these things have happened for centuries. And, I think that it's a rarity that that's happening to us, but if it is, take the opportunity.
Well said. Please, those of you out there who are listening, take that advice. So we've kind of talked a little bit about kind of contrasting Canada and the US a bit, and we've got the benefit of the three of you each have some measure in different shapes of experience with the US and Canada, and also outside of North America. So can you give me some thoughts on how the experience of EDI and we've talked about how there isn't necessarily as much advancement as we'd like is unique to Canada? Like, contrast the Canadian and US experience for me, if you will. And I'm going to ask Patrice to start on that.
It's the same but different. Does that make sense? So in the US, for me, it was I know where it stood. Right? It's very direct. Especially in a corporate space, some of the big clients I would go to, when I walk into the room, especially if I'm holding a box, I'm assumed to be the paralegal or support. I'm not the lawyer there to prep you, for your witness testimony. That's the assumption that's made. And so, I had that experience. It was very overt. They let you know sometimes by calling you the N-word. That permeates, right? And then when I came back to Canada, Canadians are generally polite, right? And I got the sentiment, I don't see color. We're not racist in Canada. We're not like the US. Oh my goodness, we can't be racist here because that's not us. We're nice people. We're polite. But, one of my experiences here with one of my former leaders was, I complained that an external counsel was being sexist and racist in some of their comments to me, and I wanted to fire them. But my leader's response immediately was, oh, no, Patrice, that can't be right. My leader had no contact with this lawyer, this external counsel. But the response to my belief and my comment was, no, that can't be right, because we don't talk about that here. That's not, no, it must be something else. And I couldn't fire I couldn't fire them, and I had to deal with this unpleasant person on his file. So the writing was on the wall for me soon after that experience that, okay, this isn't for me. And then, I've been in the Caribbean where EDI is just as much of an issue, but it has a different taint on it because, you're dealing with the effects of colonialism. They still persist, right? So, there are lots of Black lawyers throughout the Caribbean, lots of them. There's some of them that aren't practicing, but if you look at the most successful firms, they are all or predominantly white. And then, you've got the corporations, the large corporations that use some of these firms, their executive teams, and their boards look like those firms. So they get a lot of the business. And so, in one territory, for example, I was told, right, that the legislature passed this act that required big FIs, financial institutions, to publish their list of approved counsel and the criteria for selecting them, because there was a sentiment among the bar that the work was going to these predominantly white firms and not everyone else, right? So there's still this, issue. So it's a different way. Everybody has work to do. But I feel like, in the Caribbean, you're still dealing with colonialism. It's race, class, color, all of those things that kind of determine who gets the work. A colleague had told me in no uncertain terms that I could not get into, if I tried, one of the larger firms in Jamaica because I didn't have the right primary education. I didn't go to the right school. So forget everything else that I've done. You can't get in. So there's work to be done, I think, in all of those spaces. Sue-Lynn and Terrie can share their perspective as well.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, Patrice, I agree with you about it's different, same but different. So definitely more overt. I'll give two stories. So I lived and worked in Chicago for some years. And I remember when I first got there, I was having a meeting with an internal client. So someone from the business side, and we'd been given an issue. The team and I were trying to work it through, and I was having a conversation to talk solutions. And when you're talking to someone and you can tell they're kind of not really listening. And this gentleman finally said, I've got to tell you something. You don't talk like Black people. You don't talk like a Black person. And I said, oh, what does a Black person talk like? And he said, oh, And I said, no, I don't really know. Why don't you tell me? Anyway, you can imagine that was the end of the meeting. We never got anything done. I come back to Canada having, in a similar meeting with somebody, and the conversation went, you don't look like a lawyer. Same sentiment, same challenge. In both scenarios, we didn't get done what we were supposed to do because of somebody's bigotry. But the Americans will tend to, and of course I'm generalizing, it tended to be more overt, as Patrice said. The challenge I see in Canada that concerns me is people, I think they mean well, they're well-intended, but because it's not overt, it's easier for us to just say, well, it doesn't exist here. It's better here. And I know a lot of people when I came back said, oh, it has to be better for you here. It on the surface, it sometimes feels like it's better, but the challenge is, it was the movie, I think, A Few Good Men, where Jack Nicholson says, in places we don't like to talk about in parties, that there's still discrimination, there's still bias, there's still things that keep us from creating truly diverse and inclusive cultures and organizations in our organizations, which, as I always say, it hurts business. It's bad for business.
So, with that, I mean, what challenges do we see? And if there are opportunities out there, that we should mention that too. In particular, for Black lawyers, amongst the BIPOCs and other equity-seeking groups. So, because we've talked a little bit about EDI generally, we've talked about the Black experience, but what are these barriers? Any of them particular to Black lawyers?
I would say that often Black lawyers can hold themselves back, and not to dispute the fact that there's a lot of other things that are holding us back, but those things are things often we can't control. What we can control is having more of a sense of entitlement to be in the seats that we're in. Some of the things that Terrie and Patrice said about people perceiving you a certain way, whether it's in the US or in Canada, I've always tried to use that to my advantage. So as an M&A lawyer, I love it when a target underestimates me. It puts me in a fantastic negotiating position. It helps targets talk very freely about the good, the bad, the ugly of their company. And I like, oh yeah, Joe, as we're eating dinner, because he feels really comfortable talking to me because I make him feel very comfortable. I use that all to my advantage. And so I'm always looking for that silver lining. And maybe it's because I'm a glass full kind of person. I am not naive and ignorant to the racism, because it exists in Canada, in my view, as much as it does in the US. It's just we're much more polite about it. And in fact, it holds us back because we don't talk about it. And I think the more that we hide the fact that we're Black, or hide the fact that maybe we want something or need something that we haven't asked for, that holds us back. So from my own perspective, I ask for what I want. I ask for what I need. And I don't often get no's, but if I get a no, I just go somewhere else. Like what Patrice said, like look for where you feel comfortable. And if that is a barrier, that's only a barrier there. I think that if you are authentically yourself and you're that way from the very beginning, then hopefully the organization wants you to bring your whole self to work. Sometimes they have some regrets, but in the end, you really are going to deliver value for the organization if you can be yourself. And so I would, encourage people to be themselves, so that we can start to break down some of these barriers, talk to each other, have allies help us with the things that we need. Because if we don't ask and we just assume that someone's going to see or identify or promote us without asking for those things, then we're naive. People are not looking at you. So you have to make sure that they see you by saying, hey, this is what I need, this is what I want. Because if you're intentional about the ask, then at least you know where you stand. If it's yes or no, but you don't have to live inside your head.
That's a good point, Sue-Lynn. On the authenticity piece, it took me a while, at the start of my career to be my true self. I mean, I remember when I came to Canada and the question, everyone, we all get this, where are you from, right? And it's like, I don't want to say Jamaica, because then the conversation turns to, a lot of Jamaicans are over here committing crime. It's like, we're the criminals. The Jamaicans are the criminals, right? So I never want to say Jamaica. And I know some of my other Black colleagues, they get mistaken for Jamaicans all the time. The assumption is you're Jamaican. So it's hard, but now I proudly claim it, right? When anyone asks where I'm from, where my family's from. But then, the authenticity piece is, I'm the first. I'm an immigrant. I'm not going to embarrass my family and my friends with Caribbean heritage. You know this, right? You're going to go into the space and all of our Black people. Don't you embarrass the family. Don't you embarrass the race by being yourself. Okay? Keep your head down, work hard, just be yourself at home and with the family, but not in your workspace. I think more of us are overcoming that now, but I think that still lingers with a few of us.
Yeah, I would agree. Sorry, just quickly. And I think it actually impacts when you can't be your authentic self. And I know there's been a lot of talk about this, when you can't be your authentic self. And I have been in many spaces where I could not be. I think it impacts your ability to work. I think it impacts, I think it impacts your ability to perform and function. And I think organizations, again, I keep using this phrase, safe space, have to really make a safe space so people can be their authentic selves. People can bring all of themselves to work. And I think it's a benefit to the organization.
So that's helpful as a transition to where I want to go next, which is, we've talked a lot about barriers and challenges. Let's talk a little bit about some things that are working, or we think are working, to help to address this situation. One of them is asking for what you want, Sue-Lynn. I love that as a starting point. But what kind of actions, programs, or initiatives have you seen that have been effective in creating, some real change and in removing some of the barriers we've talked about? And I'm going to ask Terrie to start.
So what I've seen work really well in organizations is where senior management, leadership are given goals. And I'm not talking just numbers. I'm talking, true goals that can be tracked and measured, like any other financial goal. And there's some weight to it. So, for example, an executive is told X percent of your compensation is going to be based on promoting things that promote equity, diversity, and inclusion in the organization. What I will say is, you want something changed. We're all in business. If you want to make change, if you want to accomplish something, if you want to grow your company by X percent, you want to, increase your EBITDA, you're going to give your senior management carrots and incentives to make that happen. This has to be treated exactly the same way.
I mean, that's a great point. Any other thoughts on that, Patrice or Sue-Lynn?
I would just say that when I ask for what I want, what helps is if I actually feel or see action based on what I've asked for. And so I think that's a great way to change things, is if you ask and people have heard you and they want to make change, then you'll be able to see it. It'll be demonstrated. And that demonstration can be everything from what you specifically asked for, but then also thinking ahead. So some of the things I've asked for in the past have been, what's the succession plan for, my client relationship manager? What are you doing to make sure that your lawyers are healthy, happy, engaged? Because in my view, if you are including your lawyers and you've got that kind of environment, then they're going to give discretionary effort. They're going to be loyal. They're going to be on my files. And so, do they reward non-billable hours for things that they give to their community, or allow them to bring their whole selves to work? How do you navigate things like giving credit for working on a file? A lot of times files might have, someone being the client relationship manager and getting all the credit for it, but then you've got the people who are the real workhorses doing all the work. And I always wonder, how does that work there? So I think more transparency about how some of those things are done, or at least taking steps to be able to defend yourself if someone comes knocking and saying, hey, what are you guys doing over there? And I think that, Fasken's is a great example of a law firm that has always been one that I think, at least in my 20 years in the legal profession, has always been one that's been known to be friendly to diversity, equity, and inclusion just by their actions. And so if you're out there demonstrating that you are about diversity, equity, inclusion, the right people are watching. So I think that's really important.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Can I just add something? Oh, go ahead, Patrice. Sorry, go ahead,
I'm
Patrice.
just going to say, I agree with, what Terry has said, what Sue-Lynn has said, but, also keep it simple. Train people not to say offensive crap. Train them not to say and do things that are offensive. That works too. But, on the law firm, I've seen some law firms, Andrew, you talked about, opening the pipeline, going to undergrad students. Some firms have gone to high school. So, you set your sights on, a particular high school in the community. And so those students see that, okay, the practice of law is reachable, right? So you can even target them from high school and start the mentorship and relationships so that, more of them are exposed to the practice, what it means, and that it's accessible. It's not something outside of them that they can't reach or touch.
Excellent. Yeah, no, I'm going to come back to that, because I mean, we have some early career lawyers and some students as well, I know, as part of our audience. So we're going to kind of come back with some suggestions for them. But that's a great start on that, Patrice. So I'm going to jump around to just a touch now, because you started talking about it, Sue-Lynn. So we've often focused. I don't know. It might be because I'm in private practice, and so I think that we're the center of the legal universe, even though we're not. But we often focus on what can firms do and what's happening in firms, or in the courts as well. But what can we? I'm going to ask two questions. One is, what are your expectations for law firms personally, the firms you work with? Then I'm going to switch it around, and I'm going to ask for what your expectations are in terms of what legal departments can do internally to affect equity, diversity, and inclusion. So I'm going to start with you, Sue-Lynn, in terms of your expectations for outside counsel.
Sure. I mean, my expectation for any relationships is that we share similar values. And I think that legal advice in particular is really relationship based. And it's probably one of the barriers that a lot of Black lawyers have experienced because of that. So in building those relationships, I can build relationships across all kinds of aisles with all kinds of diverse groups because values are things that we can share. And so I am looking for that. Like, does this law firm hold similar values to me? Make money for my business, care about people, individuals, because I really believe if you take care of your people will take care of your business. And I think that goes for not only a company, but also for the law firms. And so I look for that, sharing my values. I look for what they're doing to make progress in the community. Is the law firm out in the community? What are they doing besides trying to make money? We're all trying to make money, but part of something like ESG, for example, is, that community engagement. Are you visible? Do other people know that those are the kinds of values that you hold? But one thing I would love to share that I actually learned in a diversity and inclusion training module I did a few months ago at work, and it was called Managing Inclusion, and it helped identify some blind spots for myself. And it was about identifying who are your go-to people, and really thinking about who do I always go to, and then why. What is it? What are those go-to characteristics that I go to? And then how can I develop those go-to characteristics in other people to expand my pool of people? So that just builds capacity. So in my mind, I thought, wow, that's brilliant. There's always, that handful of lawyers I go to on my team. And I really started thinking about what are those things and being intentional about trying to develop some of those things in some of the other people. And I think that is something that all lawyers can do, no matter where you're in-house or you're in private practice. Start thinking about, well, why do you always go to that same group of 5 associates? Why do you always, why? Really dig into that, because you're limiting yourself if you just keep going to those same people, especially in this really hot legal market. So make sure that you really think about those kinds of things that you want to develop, but then also don't butter spread how you want everyone to develop. I think that, yes, it takes a little bit more work to really hone in on how someone wants to be developed, where they want to go. We don't all want to be robots. And so I think taking that kind of individual journey with taking someone under your wing and helping bring them along. I've been the beneficiary of fantastic principals all throughout my career. And a lot of them didn't even look like me in my own organizations. And so I know that there are so many allies that are there willing to bring you up and teach you the ropes and give you the tools. And then you have all of your other mentors. So from different communities, Terrie has been mentoring me since law school. And so, having those kinds of role models in the space is really helpful. So you can help as an ally, but you can also help by encouraging more diversity in your organization, because those are people that can also help mentor those individuals.
Terrie or Patrice, your expectations?
Sure. But I'm trying to get on the Terrie mentoring bandwagon. So however I can do that, just to plug.
So just so you know, Patrice, every new GC needs to take the Terrie training program, because she's got the playbook.
No one told me, but I'm offering myself up, Terrie, to be mentored by you if you have time. Okay. But Andrew, I think, just like Sue-Lynn said, the expectation, you want to make sure your external counsel is walking the walk, but I think you also want to make sure who they're engaging, right? So I'll talk about just from the Caribbean perspective, because, if you're an institution, you're doing work outside of the country and, your Canadian lawyer has to hire local counsel, well, who are they going to? Right? So you want them to be focused on the EDI agenda and whoever they're engaging on your behalf as well. Right? And so, and in terms of what law departments can do internally, we are, my friends and I joke sometimes that we're the reading and writing department, because everything comes to us and, we have to sign off on everything. So, I look at offer letters, I look at HR policies, I look at marketing, I look at comms, I look at all of those things. Anything that goes to the public, I'm looking at. So I'm looking at the images, I'm looking at the language. So when I comment, well, this can be more inclusive. Why are we using that image and not something else? Or why have we used this language? And so because we have a lot of influence in the legal department, we can direct change. And to the extent that we're also corporate secretaries, we're advising the board, right? So we can propose diversity policy if the board doesn't have one, or we can make it more inclusive if we don't think it is. Or we're also looking at board mandates and other governing documents that may, present barriers to directorships, right? If you don't have term limits, then these guys are sitting on the board forever, and you don't get to kind of apply your diversity policy. So we're in that position where we can propose changes to those documents to our board and to the organization as a whole, to make it more inclusive.
Yeah, I would say I'm looking for a firm to bring me their brightest. I heard Sue-Lynn say innovative, hardworking counsel that are going to help me solve the problems that I have and the issues that I have and help my client succeed. And you cannot bring me that team if they're homogeneous. You haven't brought me your best. You just haven't. It just is. It's statistically impossible. And so, I'm sure Patrice and Sue-Lynn will do the same. I mean, we have no problem saying to our client relationship partners, I won't work with you unless you show me that not only is there diversity, and I'm learning this, Sue-Lynn, I'm kind of new to this game, but also the credit, right? The client credit. I had, a partner say to me, we just don't know what to do. Our associates are leaving, and we ended up setting up a program with them with the Black in-house counsel group. And we had connected Black associates with Black in-house counsel just so they could start to, these could be their future clients, but just so both groups could start having conversations and networking and learning. I've sort of said, put somebody junior on the file. We'll help train them. If you're not going to train them, we'll train them. We've got great lawyers on our team, and they're happy to train. So I think I think law firms shouldn't be afraid to reach out to counsel like Sue-Lynn and Patrice and me and say, what can I do? Because we can help you. We can make this happen, and it helps all of us. I think that's definitely a good step.
And I think we should take advantage of that offer of help, because especially in this market, it is so hard to hold on to talent. There was a time when I stood up at an event and I said, all the associates in my group within the practice were Black, and we had 2 Black partners in this group. It's great. We're eventually going to be the entire Black team, and then COVID hits and people get so marketable, and people who've been at the firm and enjoy being at the firm for a long period of time decide, well, I'm going to go over here where they're going to pay me 3 times as much because, I can't. So anything we can do to help retain people, I think firms need to take advantage of. Even when you're in a good place, it's still the case that, actually it's a good thing, because, it means that, if a Black associate is super marketable, then we're getting to where we need to be, right? Because the white associates are right now. So that's great.
Andrew, can I mention one other thing? I think that's been huge in my career, and I think the firms don't have these types of programs. And Patrice and Sue-Lynn, I don't know if you've had experience about sponsorship. So informal sponsorship happens all of the time, but it doesn't happen to Black and other underrepresented groups. It just doesn't happen. And I've experienced this in a firm. You're very much alone, and there's nobody looking out for you, promoting you, talking about you in meetings. And I will tell you, in my career, and it wasn't a lawyer, it was the CEO of a company I worked for previously, and even my current CEO, who've been huge promoters of me. And it makes a big deal, and it makes a huge influence on somebody's career. And I'm sure we all can think about someone in your career that has tapped you or given you an opportunity, or pushed you where you didn't think you could go, and given you that opportunity to succeed. But to be completely honest, it will not happen organically. In firms, it has to be deliberate. There has to be actually a program set up. We're doing one right now at our organization. And if you don't do that, it's not going to happen. So I would encourage firms to be deliberate about setting up sponsorship programs for their Black and other underrepresented associates.
That is very helpful. So any other thoughts on just on that topic? Because I do want to kind of spend a minute on that one about, how we can work together, law firms and outside counsel and inside counsel, to support advancing of EDI. And I think we talked about kind of the differences between, being junior and senior to a certain extent. But if there's any advice that you can give to the junior people and the more senior people who are client facing, how they can perhaps lead change within their organizations. So not necessarily the firm itself, but the individuals. Any thoughts? And I'm going to ask Terrie, maybe if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say just simply to start having the conversation. And I know, and I've seen this, people hesitate to have the conversation. They don't want to say something that's going to be offensive. But I will say, I'll put my hand up, and I know Sue-Lynn and Patrice will do the same. I'm always happy to have that conversation, and I won't be offended. And you will learn, I will learn. I mean, I just think we have to figure out how we can partner together. Because Andrew's right, it is a talent war, and we're going to lose if we don't figure out how to give opportunities to Black associates and Black partners and Black lawyers in-house. We're just going to lose. So I think it just starts with a conversation.
I think it's easier to keep people if they like where they work. And so it goes back to employee engagement, and that means you're junior, you're senior, whoever. I'm sure it's great to work for you, Andrew. So I don't mean to say that if you've lost some people, but ultimately that's all you can offer, because in a wage war, like, I'm definitely not going to win. All I can do is, I really sincerely believe that practicing law can and should be fun. Problem solving, doing big deals, going to court, like all those great, sexy things that we thought about when we went to law school. I think they're possible. And I think that if people continue to push and demand that instead of just suffering where you are, I think that's the worst thing that you can do. I always tell people, create your own story. If you're not happy, go somewhere where you feel like you belong, like you're engaged, because when you do feel like that, you're loyal. You give that discretionary effort. You get that extra push. You pick up the phone on your vacation and get one of your senior partners on the phone for me, Andrew, because we built that relationship, and I wouldn't call you if it wasn't an emergency. So like being able to leverage those kinds of relationships, all that stuff is really key and important. But we have to really be brave and have real conversations, because battling systemic anti-racism, especially anti-Black racism, requires hard work and thicker skin and, be brave. And I think that we're all learning together. So if we can have those real conversations, and I've had some very real conversations over the past couple of years since George Floyd's murder. And I think all of them have been growth for me, growth for my organization, growth for the executive team, growth for my external firms. So we're all growing together. And I think that's positive.
Yeah, I agree with what Sue-Lynn and Terrie have said, and the inclusion piece is so key. It's because it's like you can get as many Black lawyers as you can find into your organization, but if they don't feel included, they're not going to stay, right? And so it is hard, right? To how do you make someone feel like they're a part of something? Well, it's kind of getting to know them, what's important to them, and helping them develop, right? So I think part of it is and let's be honest, big law, the associates come in and they're work, right? They're putting in the hours to get the work done. So you got to think about, okay, how do I make this person feel like they can get a benefit out of this too? They're not just giving me their hours and their time, but I'm here to help develop them as well, right? So that's, like Sue-Lynn said, it's hard work, but I know, for me, when I feel like someone's invested in me, and Terrie-Lynne's right about sponsorship, I've been lucky to have those sponsors in different organizations, and it's helped me. But when you feel like somebody's invested in you, right, and invested in your development. So when you come in, I'm not just here to, be a number and churn out documents or files. They actually care about my development as a lawyer too. So maybe also, looking at ways to invest in them when they come in.
It's interesting because our profession is a challenging one because, even in-house as well as in private practice, of my brief experience now seconded in-house, it's not necessarily built on going to a place and staying there for 30 years and being just there, right? So one of the things we also have to do when we talk about supporting people, and I'll say this about the associates in my firm, is we also have to support them in terms of what's the best decision for their career, right? And sometimes that may not be staying in the same place. Particularly, I think maybe you can comment on this on the in-house, because I think we've seen in your respective experiences, that sometimes you've got to leave the place that you may be comfortable at, go someplace else, take out the stretch assignment or do whatever it is to get ahead. And that's how we can get ascend to the higher levels within the profession as well. So I think we do have to support the whole person, as you said. So that's great. So that kind of takes me, because we're getting late in our program here, to kind of the early career advice. So I do want to pause and get each of your respective thoughts on what advice we would provide to Black lawyers or other or BIPOC lawyers early in their career. What can they do to kind of help to develop themselves, to have the great experiences that will lead them to be senior, successful lawyers in their respective area of the legal practice? So I'm going to ask Sue-Lynn maybe to start on that one.
Yeah, for sure. I love giving advice to people who are just starting out. I would say be brave, chase your happy. Don't be afraid to leave a situation where you don't feel included or welcome or any of those things. Don't believe the hype of you have to stay there and stick it out for a certain number of years because it looks bad on your resume, or how can you leave that paycheck behind? It will be okay. And, it's really about the packaging and the story in the long term, but don't get stuck somewhere where it's really difficult to make that pivot. So it's easier to pivot in your earlier parts of your career. Maybe litigation isn't for you. Maybe private practice isn't for you. That's okay. But relentlessly pursue it until you're in a place where you feel like you belong. Because if you wait and you get to a point in your career where you're not happy, then your story is, I hate being a lawyer, so I quit law and I'm going to go make soap in Key Largo. So don't let that be your story.
Unless you make great soap, right? If that's your true calling. Any thoughts on that, Terry or Patrice?
I mean, I can't add to that, Andrew. I can't add to that.
Okay.
I always have advice, and I'm always interested in giving advice. But just quickly, for me, it's I think if I look back on the mistakes I made, there are many, but I didn't always have a counsel of people, and so I wish I had reached out. And I learned this later in my career, where I had a group of amazing Black lawyers that I would talk to and get advice from. And you need that because it's hard. It's really hard. It's isolating. There will be times where you're sitting in a room and, I think a lot of people who aren't a person of color, they aren't a visible minority, don't understand how isolating it can be to sit in a room and you are the only person who looks different. I mean, you don't think about it, but sometimes it hits you. It's very isolating. So get the counsel, get the group, get a mentor. I have been blessed to have some great mentors. I think I heard somebody say it doesn't have to be a Black person, but get a mentor and then get to know people. Patrice said something interesting and I didn't get to comment on it, which was, I think for a lot of us, especially those of us from the Caribbean, you're taught, put your head down and work. Just put your head down and work. I would encourage you to lift up your head. Work, absolutely. But get to know people. Get to know people at the firm. Get uncomfortable. Put yourself in places where, you're at a cocktail party, you're going to something that you wouldn't normally go to. Get uncomfortable because it will pay off and people will get to know you and you'll get to know people and you'll learn something. So I would say those are the three things. If I had to do it over again, that's what I would do.
Okay, we'll add to that, Andrew. Be yourself. Just back to the keeping your head down, because if you're pretending, people aren't going to get to know you, you won't make those connections, right? If you're hiding who you are, they won't see. So let your personality out, let them know you like hip hop music and soca. That's okay. You'll be surprised at how many other people like it too. So be yourself. I'll add that.
Wow. That is a perfect addition. Thank you, Patrice. Hard not to end on a be yourself comment, because that's what we need to do to get ahead. It's also what we are aspiring to be able to do. We want to be able to go into work, be ourselves, be successful, and not have it be you're the Black person with all this baggage on your shoulders. So I like to end with that. So be yourself. And with that, I'm gonna pass it off over to Andrew Nunes. And Andrew, are there any questions for us? This is the time where we are gonna listen to our audience.
Thanks, Andrew. And just before we get into the Q&A, I do have to say what an awesome discussion and conversation this has been. And I want to thank the panelists and you as well, Andrew, for such an enlightening discourse. There are some questions that have come in, but there's also a number of comments with people just appreciating all that's been said during the past hour. So thanks very much. Some of the questions have also been answered through the questions that the panelists have responded to, but there are some, and maybe we can explore just a couple or a few of them. One of them speaks to sponsorship. And I know we've talked about this a little bit already. The question is, a lack of sponsorship is still an issue in some legal departments and their organizations. How can lawyers of color gain sponsorship from senior leadership in their organization? So I think drilling down just a little bit further, how do you become that person who actually is benefiting from a sponsorship opportunity within legal organization or legal department?
I can answer that one and just share with my own experience. It didn't happen in the legal department, but I think it's analogous for sure. For me, and I think about the last company I worked at, the CEO of the organization became my sponsor. And it was just a question of, when I first started, we were colleagues. We were both on the executive. She wasn't the CEO yet. That wasn't in the cards, not where she was going. But we worked really well together. And I mean, it was easy because I actually liked her, but she and I just worked well together, and she liked what I did. She would come to me for advice on things, and we developed a good rapport. And so as a result, when she became CEO, she was promoting me, supporting me. She was one of the people that encouraged me to, take this transfer to Chicago. So what I'd say is, look out for people. I always say, look for your fans. There will always be people within your organization, in the legal department or outside, who like your work, who like you, who are coming to you. Develop those relationships. That person may not end up getting promoted, but if they do, or whatever happens, that's somebody who will connect with you, who will promote you, who will speak about you. And it just is more fun. Like Sue-Lynn said, we want to have fun. It's just more fun to work with people you like. So look for your fans.
Thanks, Terrie. That's very helpful. If none of the other panelists want to add to that, I'll go on to another question. This one now takes us back to the discussion around law firms getting work, right? And of course, the lawyer's ears will perk up necessarily when that's what we're talking about, but not only that. But here's the question. Can firms earn the work with talent that shows without being overt that the team is diverse, or do we need to shout it out loud? Okay. Can we earn the work with talent that shows without being overt that the team is diverse, or do we need to shout it out loud?
I can speak from my own perspective. Often when I am coming to a firm to give them work, it's because I've done a little research already. So I know that that's a firm that is strong in that particular subject matter area. So I'm assuming that they are competent and they can do the work. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't be calling them. But then when they staff the file, however they staff the file, I'm watching. So I haven't done any RFPs or any of that kind of exercise. Not that I will never do it, But to me, it doesn't have to be overt, but I'm absolutely watching for details. I'm always looking for who's not in the room. And I would encourage other people to do the same thing, right? It's not as overt. When you have a bunch of homogenous people sitting around the table, it's not really noticeable that there's not diversity. But when one person there is of diversity, then people start looking around going, aren't there more? Is there only one woman here? Or is there only one Black person here? So, I watch very carefully. I notice those things. And so it doesn't have to be overt, but I will recognize if it's not.
Yeah, I agree with Sue-Lynn. As the first GC for my organization, when I started to, and I'm continuing to build a panel, I'm doing my research, right? And I'm reaching out to people I already know, and I'm asking my colleagues, who do you use for X, Y, and Z? So you don't need to shout it out loud, but we'll find out and we'll know.
Can I jump in on that one just to kind of drill down a bit? So we don't need to shout it out. You do your research, but like where, other than kind of through your network where you know of firms, et cetera, like where do you notice that a firm is diverse if you're not like sitting in a room against opposite them? So it's not necessarily shouting it out, but like how can you make it known even if it's subtly as opposed to shouting?
I think you just put them on the files. So, I just was on a call yesterday, and I know I'm taking calls and I'm on holiday, but, with a firm, and, there was nobody that looked like me on that call. So I think what Sue-Lynn and Patrice have both said, we know it. I don't think you need to shout it out. I just think you need to put people on your panels. I did an RFP many years ago, probably at least 10 years ago now. And the thing that drove me nuts is the firms that responded knew I was Black, and they just brought all their Black lawyers. But they're bringing Black lawyers in areas of law that I would never need. Never. I don't need a tax lawyer. Why are you bringing your Black tax partner? So don't, great that you're showing me that you have diversity, but I'd like to see diversity on the teams that are actually going to work with me. So I think it's just be authentic.
Thanks, everyone. I want to take it just another step further along similar lines. So let's say we've won the work. I know in some instances, organizations, they're realistic in terms of where things are, and they're not looking for firms that necessarily have it all together, but they're looking for firms that are making the effort, they have a plan, they're doing the right things, they're trying to get there. So let's say the work's been granted on that basis. We talked about differences between Canada and the US. I know that in the US, there are some organizations which are actually firing their law firms if their law firms fail to make the progress that is expected of those firms from a diversity perspective. So the question is, do you ever see Canadian organizations getting to that same place where firms are actually being fired because they're not achieving certain diversity goals?
Yes. And I see that in that I don't expect firms to read minds though either, right? And so it won't be a surprise if I was to fire some firm because they haven't made progress. It's because I've told them these are what my expectations are, and we'll have a conversation about the development and how they can respond to those expectations, and then we're a partnership. I always believe that, my external counsel and in-house, we're a team. We're going to deliver value, and we both have skin in the game. And so that's the way I look at it. But if I feel like you're not partnering with me because you haven't met the expectations I have, or haven't been honest with me about being able to meet those expectations, then that's a firm that doesn't share my values. So again, it's, if you say that you're with me and you say that you have these same values, then I want to hold them accountable. I haven't fired a firm that I've talked to, but I want to see change. And if you can't do it, then don't say that you can.
And I'm still building my panel, so I don't see myself firing anyone just yet. But like Sue-Lynn says, it's, if you're not with me, then, what's the point? So, if you're trying, that's what I'm looking for. If you're trying to meet the goals, everyone's struggling, right? We know, we've talked about it here today. So, but I need to see that you're actually trying and doing something about the problem you're having. So, yeah.
Right. Thank you. That's very helpful. I think we may have time for one more, maybe two. There was discussion about safe spaces and the need to have a space that is safe, an environment that is comfortable to allow Black lawyers and others to really do their best work. Can you share with us maybe a small example of something that majority lawyers, whether it's in an in-house legal department or in a law firm, can do to help to create that more positive environment? And while you're thinking about that, I'll share just a quick anecdote of my own. I remember that when I first started at the firm as a summer student, ran into a senior lawyer at the firm, got into a short discussion, and he very quickly invited me to his ski club. Now, I didn't ski at the time, but it still was a very welcoming gesture. And it made me feel a lot more comfortable, made me feel like people wanted me there. They wanted to involve me in what they did. Do you have any examples of your own or any suggestions as to what lawyers can do to make the firm or the legal department a more welcoming and comfortable space?
I know for me, it's just soliciting my feedback, right, on something that might not be legal related. So I'll talk about, just an organization, legal gets tapped for advice for lots of different things. But, when the CEO comes to me and says, I just want your view on this. There's no legal issue here, but I just want to know what you think about X, right? And just letting the person know that they're valued and their feedback is valued, I think that goes a long way. And I think too many times, maybe senior lawyers don't look to junior lawyers for what they think. It's just, here, go off and do this. Here's your assignment, go do it. But sometimes it's good to solicit feedback from the people who are junior to you, or, maybe not even in your department. It's all about building a relationship. So that helps me.
I actually intentionally create space for the lawyers on my team to make mistakes. When I first joined, I said, listen, we're going to be moving fast. We're going to be driving hard. We're going to be doing too much with too little. We're going to make mistakes. And that's okay. Just be honest with me and we'll fix them together. And we will, we've got each other's backs and we'll plow forward. But I think that being really intentional about saying that mistakes are okay, especially for people of color or for women who, again, might be working 3 times as hard and blah, 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 and all the stuff that we're told that we have to do. I don't subscribe to that. I feel like I want people to work the way they best deliver value. And I tell people that I don't care about FaceTime. Like, I'm just really honest about what I care about. And because I tell them what I care about, they can tell me what they care about. And if there's a match, fantastic. And that might mean altering how someone's compensated. That might mean that these teams work from home and because they don't want to come into the office. This team needs to come into the office. That's okay. I'm really flexible because I'm really all about, if you believe in diversity, you will accommodate all of those things that will allow people to bring their best selves to the table. So I think that how I've created that space is by telling my team that, but then also delivering. When they do make a mistake, if they do need some extra support because they've got something going on at home, I demonstrate that I rally the whole team in order to help take up for the lack of the work on their side. So we've got each other's back. It's a safe place.
And I would add to that, I think you hear me talk a lot about intentionality. You have to be intentional about things like reaching out. So picking up the phone or, getting on Teams these days when we're together, going for a coffee with Black lawyers in your organization. And I've heard people say, well, I don't want to offend. I don't know what to ask. It's very simple. We all have families. We all eat. We all listen to music. We all have hobbies. Those are great questions to have. I can tell you, I've been in spaces where I've worked for people, and I'll say white men, for years, and they have never asked me one question about, they know nothing about me because they don't ask. And I think being very intentional and making a safe space by being interested in somebody and being intentional about it helps to break down those barriers.
Thanks, Terry. Thanks, everyone. I think that's a great place to end, and we've run out of time. This has truly been a very rich discussion. And we would like to again thank each of our panelists, Patrice, Rouse, Sue-Lynn, Noel, Terrie-Lynne, Devonish, for gracing us with your time and your presence today, and all the wisdom and all the nuggets that you've shared with us. Invaluable. And also to our moderator, Alleyne, thank you, and our firm managing partner, Peter Feldberg, and also all of those who helped behind the scenes to make this happen. So thanks to everyone. We look forward to continuing the conversation and taking appropriate action. But thank you all for joining, and enjoy the rest of your day.